Hi guys. So I got a really interesting email from Steve Chang who asked me a really interesting question. Which philosophers are useful? Like useful, to get ahead in life, to make more money, just practically useful. And that is a really interesting question because, of course, most of philosophy is really abstract stuff. It's talking about being and essence and all these kind of metaphysical systems which are abstract, and none of this stuff has none of it seems like it has much to do with the real world. So you might be actually surprised that there are some philosophers which are super useful. And in fact, uh, there was one philosopher I will talk to you about in a minute, whom pretty much most leaders have read. Like most, Hitler, Stalin, uh, just about every major historical figure of the past 200 years has read this philosopher, right? So there definitely is, philosophy which is useful, practically for your life. So this philosopher is Niccolo Machiavelli, all right? A really famous Italian historian, statesman, and of course political philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli. So he was a Florentine philosopher, and he wrote a famous book which is really controversial to this day, called The Prince. Okay, it was dedicated to one of the Medici rulers. So there was, if you know something about Renaissance history, there was this dynasty of Medicis, and they took power in Florence. But there was a period when they lost it, and Machiavelli was kind of caught in all this intense political life, and watching it firsthand, and also working as a diplomat abroad. He's gone on missions to France and other countries. He summarized his wisdom, which most of it he got firsthand from observing things, from observing human nature, and he wrote this masterpiece known as The Prince. Okay, so it's really a terrific book. Okay, it really will change your life and make it for the better. A lot of people, like, if you haven't read the actual book, you probably heard a lot of bad things about it. Like it's satanic, it's evil, it's promoting cruelty and dictatorship. So most of this sort of evil reputation that Machiavelli has was actually propaganda. So, and I can even tell you the guy's name, the guy who was, kind of spreading this anti-Machiavellian propaganda. His name was Reginald Pole, who was an English cardinal, and he was very pro-pope, and Machiavelli was anti-pope. He believed in secular politics, in just kind of secular ruling of the state, without sort of clerical intervention. So Reginald Pole, 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 just like the stick. He gave us this, reputation, gave us this, kind of stereotype of Machiavelli, which, most of us believe to this day. So Machiavelli's Prince is a really small book. It's about 60 pages long, and you can just read it in just 2 nights, easy. So fabulous advice for your life. Really, Machiavelli talks about essentially human nature. Okay, not the way people should be, not the way. Not like in some utopian sense, like, oh, this would be so nice if people were this way, but he actually looks at the way people are. Okay, and if you, all of us have been, hurt in life, like somebody, mistreated you, insulted you, humiliated you, cheated on you, um, caused you a lot of pain. And, uh, Machiavelli really helps you understand, why that happened, why people are the way that they are, why they hurt you, why they, take advantage of you. Sometimes it's pretty pessimistic, but it is what it is. Life is not all, lovely and beautiful. It's full of pain and suffering, and Machiavelli really exposes this kind of dark side of human nature, and it's fascinating stuff. And it's really kind of therapeutic. Like in a sense, you kind of see, well, yeah, that's human nature. Like kind of makes you accept, the bad side of human nature. Um, so Machiavelli's Prince is, divided into like a few, really small chapters. Each one is really small, and each one is like a lesson. So um, like for instance, let me ask you a question. If you are let's say you live in the Middle Ages and you are a prince, okay? You have your, castle with, like a chest full of golden coins, and, you have a little sized army. So, and you have kind of two options, okay? So, option number one is, well, first of all, let me say what it is you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve, more territory, okay? You want to expand to, kind of gain more territory. So here's the question. Would you rather invade a strongly centralized state or a semi-anarchic state? So what am I talking about? So would you rather, for instance, invade the Ottoman Empire, which is today's Turkey, with a sultan, and a strong army, or would you rather invade France, which was really divided, kind of not a strongly centralized state, like which was divided amongst, a lot of marquises and, princes and barons and all these, petty rulers, which out of these two options, which one would you rather go and invade? Turkey or France? So what is your answer? Well, if you answered France, okay, because it's not, centralized, that's mistaken. And Machiavelli would say, no, you're a bad prince, okay? You should invade a strongly centralized state, because even though it's harder to, you know, overthrow this power militarily, but once succeed, you succeed for a long time. Like, no one's going to challenge you. Like, for instance, the ancient Persian Empire, like, it was one of the most incredible, and powerful empires ever. And Alexander the Great conquered it, okay? It was hard. I mean, it was, these, battles which were all or nothing, and he went for it and he succeeded. And, but once he succeeded, that was it. Like no one, there were no rebellions, no one came to overthrow him. Now, there is kind of a different question about, why he died, because, he might have been poisoned. But the thing is, if it is hard at first, it will be easier in the future. But, the opposite scenario, such as France, would lead to the exact opposite. It would be easy at first, but then you would lose it just as quickly as you have gained it. So, for instance, in France, if you went and attacked France, it would be easy. It would be relatively easy. You would just, kind of get a few barons to help you. You would go grab some land, nice and wonderful. But, next month, just as they, teamed up with you behind your back, they would team up between themselves and, overthrow you. So you would easily get power in the first place, but you would lose it just as quickly. So, this is one example. That's like one chapter of, Machiavelli's Prince, like sort of different situations, like a situation which is, hard at first and easy later on versus easy at first and hard later on. So that's, one example. So let me ask you another Machiavellian question. So to see if you are a good prince or a bad prince. So let's say you are a prince in the Middle Ages or during the Renaissance, and one of your subordinates, your minister or whatever, really really screwed up. Okay, he really did something terrible. Let's say, I don't know, he was stealing money from the treasury. Okay, he appropriated funds. Okay, and this crime is not bad enough to execute him, but it is really really bad. So you have two options once again. So option number one is you execute his father. Okay, and option number two is you take his house away. All right, I mean, this is a hard question, and I want you to think about this. What would you have done? Okay, number one, you execute this guy's father, or number two, you take his house away. So what was your answer? If you said you would rather take his house away, Machiavelli would say you are a bad prince. Okay, because if you take away something that, like possessions, okay, those possessions, still exist. Like, you take someone's house away, well, there's the house, okay, it still exists. And, people are attached to it. So he will always, think, he will always have a grudge against you if that's what you did. Like, he'll see his house and, his house still, exists. But if you execute someone's father, which, and a father cannot be brought back to life, Machiavelli would shockingly say that's better because, well, you cannot bring someone back to life. So, in this case, this loss would be irreparable. Like the father is gone, and people move on from, something that cannot be ever gained back. But, from, physical possessions which kind of switch hands, people cannot let go of that. So, your subordinate would always have a grudge against you if you take his property away. But if you execute one of his loved ones, he will move on. I mean, it's shocking. Sometimes it's just a bit too much, but that's just to give you a taste of Machiavelli. So and he has other examples. Really really interesting stuff. Really gets deep into human motivation, human psychology. Absolutely, you have to read Machiavelli's The Prince, and if you do, then you should move on to his book on first 10 chapters of Levy's History of Rome. It's a little bit more complicated than The Prince, but really worth your time. Terrific work of history. So Machiavelli is definitely a philosopher to read if you want to become a millionaire, okay, for sure. And the second philosopher is Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian economic political philosopher, lived 100-ish years ago. And I'm sure you have heard of this, 80-20 rule, which, in kind of business, it's talked about a lot. So essentially, it's a pretty simple, law that says that 20% of people possess 80% of resources. So if you look at all the money out there, like let's say your country's GDP, okay, like go Wikipedia it. What is your country's GDP? So the 80-20 rule says that 20% of people in your country possess 80% of this GDP. And if you are not in those, 20%, if you're in the other 80%, then you possess the 20% of the GDP. So that's the rule, 80-20 rule. So Pareto talks about the elites, okay, really the top of the society, like the people at the very top, the ones who possess real power, the ones who possess real resources, and the ones who really have influence on history. Okay, so his work, that's what it talks about. So if you really want to get to this top, become a millionaire, you should study Wilfredo Pareto without a doubt. So that's pretty much my answer. Philosophy is mostly, just abstract, vague metaphysical stuff. Yes, it's true. Mostly useless stuff, practically speaking. But Machiavelli and Pareto really can make you a millionaire. I mean, I'm not saying they can, but it's definitely something incredibly useful, to be applied in your practical life. That's what I have to say about this.